I'll call the meeting, Board of Supervisors meeting back to order from our lunch break, and we are on item 34. CEO Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have Janelle Cox, our management analyst here. She's going to be presenting to you a report with regards to the Health Trust grant for Parks and Recreation Services. Janelle?
Okay, good afternoon. Hope you all have full tummies and are ready to proceed. The purpose of the report to you today is to update you on the ongoing efforts to develop a sustainable source of revenue for Parks and Recreation Services in San Benito County. As you know, the Health Trust awarded a grant to the county in 2012 for a feasibility study on the establishment of a special district and a revenue measure to support Parks, Recreation, and Library Services. That feasibility effort culminated in a public opinion survey that indicated that 55% of the respondents would support a special district and a revenue measure to fund parks, recreation, and library services. The short and long-term outcomes of the Health Trust grant include the implementation of policies that sustain access to physical activity and also advocacy efforts that promote the health of San Benito County. So building upon the expressed community support of Parks and Recreation Services and the healthy community component that the Health Trust worked with staff to develop the proposed Parks and Recreation Sustainability Plan that's before you today and approve the allocation of the remaining grant funds in the amount of $21,445 towards the effort. So the Parks and Recreation Sustainability Plan that was developed it's a comprehensive outreach effort that expands advocacy through an informal community leadership group, or what we're calling in the grant application champions. As these champions are going to support the efforts of and work in tandem with your Parks and Recreation Commission this fall on an extensive community outreach effort. It's envisioned that upon conclusion of this grant period, that is through March of 2014, the champions will continue their advocacy efforts through coordination with REACH San Benito, which is a nonprofit established here in San Benito County to support Parks and Rec. So it'll be a group of individuals that are similar to the Friends of the Library, for instance. The second component of the sustainability plan is the development of a Parks and Recreation brand for San Benito County and marketing materials. So there's an RFQ in the packet before you today that will be distributed after our discussion today, so that the brand, the talking points, and the messaging will be used to create marketing materials that will be used during the outreach efforts. And then finally, the proposal includes a sustainability component that encourages an agreement that will establish the parameters between the county and REACH San Benito, and to continue the advocacy efforts and provide ongoing funding sources for Parks and Recreation through fundraising events, for instance, and ongoing community awareness efforts. So the extension of the grant with the Health Trust and the proposed Parks and Rec Sustainability Plan provides San Benito County with community partnerships to promote the healthy lifestyles through the fostering of Parks and Recreation advocates, or champions as we're calling them, an agreement with REACH San Benito, the nonprofit established to generate revenue and support Parks and Recreation in the future. So at this point, I'll go ahead and answer any questions you may have on the information before you today.
Is there any questions from the board?
I have one, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Barrios?
Yeah, Janelle, how limited are we to be able to, because I know the timeline calls for, at the end of this year, we're going to do, and I don't think it is on. We're going to do another study to see where we're at with the support of the community for a tax, a general tax. Are we, and I know we've identified Parks and Recreation, the library, could we go further than that? Marty Richmond has been encouraging us to be in line with the city, where they have added 1%, I believe. And we can do the same thing. Are we limited? Could we say that we want to get another 0.5% in there for on the survey for public safety, perhaps? Could we do that, or are we just limited to the initial.
So you're talking about the general tax measure, which is separate from this. The general tax measure, we have,
That's about it here, though.
this is going to run in tandem with that outreach effort.
Exactly.
So you have a 2% max on additional transaction and use tax that you can allocate in the county. Since there's 1% existing, you do have the capacity for another 1% in totality. The general tax, of course, it would not be specific to what type of services you're going to provide with that tax, but you would have the ability to go up to another additional percent.
Okay, so that is still an option. So when we do the
Yes.
survey and we move forward with this timeline, we can add that if we choose to do that at that time.
We can
And
discuss that.
And I just want to point out that REACH is a nonprofit that is really, we talked about sustainability and how the River Parkway, how are we going to support it? We now have this nonprofit in place that is going to partner with the county to try to have sustainability. How far it goes, we don't know because it's relatively new, right?
It's
Janelle?
very new.
But we have something in place now that we can support, and that can support us and perhaps go out there and get partners for the whole concept of our River Parkway.
It's true. And it'll be before you, hopefully in September, we will bring the agreement forward so that you can discuss in totality the parameters of our relationship with this REACH San Benito.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Chair.
Hi. Okay, Supervisor Munzer.
I'm having a problem with getting this concept of the Parks and Recreation Champions. We have, at this time, 2 county parks. We have 2 Park and Recreation Commissions, essentially, overseeing 2 parks. I understand the idea of the nonprofit REACH, but I'm having a hard time understanding the need for a 3rd body. And I'm afraid if we create this 3rd body overseeing, even if it's a 3rd park, that they'll take on a life of their own and just be out there basically forever.
That's not the concept to develop an ongoing committee or commission that's reportable to the board. What we're trying to do is advocate some strength so that you have some volunteers in the community who are a voice out there advocating for parks and recreation. So for the purpose of this grant period, we'll work with this group of community members, and they will participate in the Parks and Recreation Commission retreat in September to develop the brand and the marketing materials. They will be an extension of the necessary people that we need to do this extensive outreach with your 9 commissioners with their workloads, with myself. It's an extension of the arm of your existing advocacy group. They would be reporting to us through the grant period. And then the intention is that these people, these advocates, these champions, will continue their advocacy work through REACH San Benito. As I said, sort of like a Friends of the Library. They will then become advocates for the nonprofit organization to continue to advocate for parks and recreation services in the community. After the grant period is over, we don't have any obligation to continue with any working committee with them. It's just for the term of the grant period that we're going to work with them and get them established and trained and on their feet and link the connection between the county and REACH San Benito so that they can then continue advocacy through REACH San Benito.
So is your intent that this Park and Recreation Champions would essentially become REACH? Or is it?
They will be champions. Maybe the title is misleading in that it says San Benito County Parks and Recreation Champions. Really, it should be Parks and Recreation Champions for San Benito County. Not necessarily the county as an institution, but the county as a whole. So they're not going to be reporting to us, but what we're trying to do is develop some strength within the county as a community, that there are people out there who are advocating in the long term for parks and recreation services. Does that help?
I still have concerns and reservations, but
Okay.
it does help.
Well, thank you.
And also I want clarification on something else that
Sure.
Supervisor Barrios brought up. You're proposing to go out to the community for a sales tax initiative. That's going to be county-wide, correct? That's going to be city, the incorporated residents plus the unincorporated residents.
That, we believe, is the direction from your board back in January, and that will come back before you at the next board meeting. Hopefully, we intend to bring that back so we can get further direction on the general tax measure.
Okay.
But that was the intent, to be a countywide general tax measure.
Okay, and I think what Mr. Richmond was talking about, and I think what Supervisor Barrios was also talking about, was just the unincorporated areas, raising that 1%. So that would be something
I didn't
totally...
understand it that way. It'll envelope the whole county.
Your tax initiative would involve everybody in the county.
We will bring it back to you for consensus, but I believe that was the understanding we had in January when you gave us that direction.
Okay.
Okay.
Just want to make sure that
Okay.
that was clear.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. Or I kind of echo Supervisor Munzer as far as setting up another body. I think we need that like another hole in the head, because it will still take staff time, and one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, and they do take a life of their own. So, you know, like Supervisor Munzer stated, we have 2 parks, 2 commissions over those parks, not counting the Ulster Recreation Commission. They've got one too.
That's right.
And why can't our Parks Commission be the Parks and Recreation champions? I thought they were.
And we've discussed this around the table at the commission meeting last month. The last couple of months we've talked about this. They strongly believe that they don't have the time and the efforts, just with the 9 of them, or well, actually there's 8 right now, and one of them is a youth commissioner, to go out and do the extensive community outreach that we're proposing for the fall. They really feel like these champions would have a separate role. They're going to be advocating for Parks and Recreation Commissions, Parks and Recreation services throughout the county, whereas their role is really to advise you on Parks and Recreation related issues. So it's sort of a separate hat. They're very similar, but they are separate. They felt that they really needed the additional staff to work with them on this effort, that there really wasn't enough resources on the existing commission to do that advocacy.
Now, is this advocacy, let's cut to the chase though. Let's
Okay.
do it right now.
Yeah.
Is this to create a taxing district and a separate entity body away that takes control of Parks and Rec away from this Board of Supervisors or away from the 2 cities? Because that's what what are we advocating for, other than to try to convince another 10% or 15% of the people to support a cent sales tax for Parks and Rec? Because
No,
that's the way I read it.
Oh.
And if that's what we're doing, let's call it that. Advocacy for another
No, no, no,
tax and another bureaucratic body.
No, that's not the intent. The intent is to have a group of people out there who are consistently supportive and every opportunity that they can are advocating for additional park and recreation services. So it's somebody who exchanges with the schools. What do you want to see in Parks and Recreation? How can we help you? Yes, we're a park and recreation fundraising element, for instance. We need somebody who's going to help us with fundraising efforts. Reach San Benito is going to, as the revenue source for you all, they need to begin some long-term fundraising events. So this advocacy group could be members of the community who are putting together fundraising events with the intent of those resources going to fund Parks and Recreation services, potentially. I know your Parks and Recreation Commission has been asking for a Benny Benito White costume, but we don't have funding for that. So maybe they lead a fundraising effort that provides the resources just for a Benny Benito White costume. So it's an additional arm of people working in this community to keep Parks and Recreation out in the forefront as a positive health element that we need here in San Benito County.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah, I just feel like
It's a
I have
rah-rah
different-
group.
You
It's
know,
a
if
rah-rah
I was to
group.
do another half-cent sales tax or
No.
a percent sales tax, as nice as parks are and as important as they
Yeah,
are,
that's up into.
our roads are a lot more important, and our public safety is paramount on that. And but it says here that the majority of respondents, 55%, indicated support for 1/2 cent sales tax for parks and recreation and services, and the results were reported to us in January. And we need 2/3 to pass the sales tax, and it just appears from this report that that's really the motivation of all this.
No, that was in relation to the grant funds. That was the purpose of the original grant. And so the Health Trust wants us to continue to promote a healthy lifestyle here in San Benito County.
We could
And
do
so
that,
the manner in
yeah.
which they're proposing that is to continue those grant funds with this ongoing advocacy and support for parks and recreation, to keep it in the forefront of the community's mind that, yes, we do want to develop a healthy community here in San Benito County.
But we're to take the 1,000 and give it to another consultant.
Only a portion of that. The majority, it depends on what the RFQ comes in at, but I'm not intending to go forward with any for more than 10,000 towards a consultant. The rest of it towards our marketing materials.
I don't know. I really have. I think I'll hear from the public, but I don't see myself supporting something like this. I'd like to spend the other 21,000 for parks and rec in our county, but as far as submitting for another study and promoting
study.
a concept that is probably premature for us right now in the light that we have so many other needs, I have a hard time with. Any Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I think it is challenging to kind of wrap my head around this concept. I mean, obviously, having worked for a couple elected officials, you work on certain policy areas, sure, but when you're sitting up here and you face a lot of challenges that we face here in San Benito County, I wish we had a rah-rah group for our local businesses. I wish we had a rah-rah group to get some more, to get economic development moving here. And that's what's hard about this whole concept and trying to wrap it around, because we have such great needs here in San Benito County, and I just think when you are strapped for resources like we are, that's why, I'm opposed to any type of tax. I'm opposed to any type of tax, and I know that the conversation isn't for here, but I'm opposed to any type of tax because, in my opinion, that's waving the white flag. We need to raise some revenue, and I have no problem with that, but the problem is we haven't gone out and tried our hardest to recruit new businesses. We haven't tried our hardest to improve our current, our situation here. And I think by going out and raising a tax, it just sends the wrong message. It really does. So with that, I think that this is, it's a positive thing. It certainly is. But I think what I'm trying to say is it's really hard, in a small county like ours, when we're strapped for resources, to kind of wrap our head around, a concept, such as this. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Sonny, you have anything?
No, I just want to hear from the public.
Okay. All right, I'll open it up for public comment if there's anybody from the public.
Marty Richmond from Hollister. You may wonder why I keep coming up here. I'm in the county. I live in the city, but the city's in the county, so I own the piece, my proportional portion of the city debt, which the side fund now is $10.8 million. I own my piece of that. The proportion of the county debt, which yours is $3.9 million for side fund and whatever you owe in OPEB, I own my proportion of that. So I come here because I own a piece of all. I'm tax fatigued out, okay? I just got through last week arguing about doubling my water rates, and I go home and open the newspaper, and there it is. PG&E has asked the PSCU for a massive rate increase. Now, you're not going to be able to get both taxes through. You'll be lucky if you get one through. And I think you're at the point, because the people, you can't put 2 or 3 on the ballot. You know what happens. They all die. And if you run one right after the other, one of them dies, or maybe both of them. And 55% isn't enough to make it. We all know that. But for a general tax, 50% plus one makes it. You got to decide. Do you want we have a library here. You may not like it, I don't know, but it has rah-rah people with it. And every year they have to come in and argue about funding, but it has supporters. It works with the high school. It works with all the schools. And every year they have to argue about funding. We have a sheriff's department, massively underfunded, okay? And even though, I don't use the sheriff's, covers the county mostly, but he's still the coroner for us, and all this. You have to decide, what do you want? What do you need the most? Do you need at this time another tax for parks, or do you need at this time the $1 million or between $1 million and $1.5 million that a 1% sales tax in the unincorporated areas of the county will bring you in for the library and the sheriff and all the other general fund stuff, including stuff you may get stuck with in the Health Care Act, I hate to say this, to cover that. You have to decide, because you're not going to get both, and I think politically you know that. So you have to decide, and I think what you need is the 1%. It's simply not fair in this county to have the people in the city paying a 1% sales tax. If you live in Ridgemark and you drive to Santa Clara and buy a car, you don't have to pay that tax. Okay? But if somebody lives in this city and drives, or the city of Hollister, and drives to Santa Clara, they have to pay a 1% extra transaction tax. It's not fair, and I think you have to decide, and you get to do the vote. I will wrap up. I'm sorry to go over. But I got to tell you, I don't understand it, because if we don't get the sheriff's coverage, if we don't get the library coverage, we might have a park, but we're not going to have anything inside. It's all going to be hollow. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Marvin Jones again. I'll let you folks wrestle with the Empire Building and the bureaucracy and all of that, but just a matter of semantics there. If you include the whole county, you're going to be under Proposition 13 with the supermajority. If you just have a special assessment district, the unincorporated areas, for example, then you could get by with the 50% plus one. So, and that would address Marty's problem there about the city paying and the county not, or that. So just a matter of semantics. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for further discussion or direction of staff.
Mr. Chair, Janelle, eventually, let's move forward 6 months down the road. Is the goal to put, and I guess some of my fellow supervisors have said it, is the goal eventually to ask the public for an increase in sales tax?
Not with this particular item.
Okay, thank you.
The goal of this particular item is to develop some marketing materials and some strength within the community to advocate for parks and recreation, and develop a cooperative relationship with Reach San Benito so that there's an ongoing revenue source for Parks and Rec.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I'm going to make a comment here, and hopefully my fellow board members might feel the same way. Some probably will not. But I kind of feel silly to try to hire a consultant to go out and prep the public to get a sales tax for our parks at this point in time. And when I think Marty has, he's right about a general tax. That's a more reasonable approach that would support all of the board's priorities. And this is just either A, it's just, oh, we got $21,000 left over, let's just go spend it. I'd rather give it back to whoever gave us the grant, or find another way to spend it on the existing parks that we have for the enhancement of those parks. And I think you could do that just as well, too. And I'd rather do that than do this and have another study collecting dust that I don't think it's a good direction for our county to go in. Supervisor Barrios, I know you're biting at the
Oh,
bit.
I'm ready to scream, actually, and I apologize, but I just feel like we're so short-sighted as a board. We really don't look at the big picture, the vision that we started out. You know, we talk about bringing in business. We talk about, creating economic, development. You have to have something in this community that draws people to our county. This eventually will be the thing that I believe is going to draw people to San Benito County. It'll encourage families to come and visit us. It'll encourage businesses to set up camp here because, look, San Benito County really cares about the quality of life of their community. That's what this is all about. You know, we got $21,000. Yeah, we don't want to just go out and spend it, but we have a plan. And this $21,000 will just help us get that plan a little bit further down the road. And it's going to, we want to get sustainability. If we don't get sustainability, we will never make that vision real. And we will be just little San Benito County with nothing. So I'm sorry, but I think this is a great direction to take. And we can't stop here just because we're being short-sighted. So I will support it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, but then I have to ask you, Supervisor Barrios. Okay, we do a 0.5% sales tax, and it's solely for Parks and Rec. How long does it take for us to come up with $35 million? And say we get 94,000 people by 2035, paying that sales tax. It still would be a colossal undertaking if we're be solely dependent on that.
Yeah, but remember, this is not about, even though this is in there eventually where we may go out and get this 0.5% sales tax, really what we're doing right now is just building up, using this money to go out to the community for information. Let them know, okay, this is what San Benito County wants to do. We have a plan, we have a vision. We need your help to support us, community. We're not going to be able to do it alone.
Right.
We need you to go out to the schools. We need you to go out to the businesses. We need you to go out to the community. That's what this is. Right now, the 0.5% sales tax may happen later, but it's not going to happen unless...
Separate issue.
It's a separate issue. The only reason I brought it up, and I wish now that I hadn't, is that we just need, we need to start somewhere. And the information part of it is the beginning. Am I right, Janelle?
This is all the use of grant funds to continue advocacy in the community to support a healthy community in San Benito County.
Remember, the money came from the Health Trust.
Health Trust.
Their primary objective is to help communities become healthier. You become healthier by having places where people can become healthier. And Parks and Recreation is a huge component of that, besides what we eat. So, yeah. Anyway, there's my spiel.
Okay, great, thank
you.
you.
Mr. Chair, I will concur with Supervisor Barrios. I honestly do believe that in the beginning, and you're correct, in the beginning it's about bringing people together, seeing if there's resources and revenues and potential partnerships available. In the long run, ultimate, you have to go to the public if we are going to support a massive project. You are absolutely correct. But I just can't shut the door right now, knowing that there might be some potential partnerships opportunities that might exist in front of us. So I have to support this concept too, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion at this time, Mr. Chair, that we receive the status report, that we review the Parks and Recreation Sustainability Plan Matrix, which we have before us, and that review the request for qualifications for marketing services and provide direction to staff to move forward with this recommendation from staff. That's my motion.
Okay, I have a motion
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chair.
and a second.
Question?
Under discussion.
Janelle, and again, maybe I'm getting hung up on the wording.
Yeah, I hope so.
I just feel like again, as I said originally, we're creating another level of bureaucracy with these champions. Is there any way of coming back to us with kind of tweaking this item, leaving that out so that, you know, having REACH be your champions, so you don't. So I mean, we have 2 commissions already. I fully support the idea of a nonprofit out there champion. I'm hung up over this title of San Diego County Parks and Recreation Champions, and I'm afraid that's going to create another level of bureaucracy.
So if it said Parks and Recreation Champions
If it
advocating
said-
for services in San Benito County?
If it said REACH will be our champions, you know, in other words, the board for REACH becomes our champion, as opposed to having a board or commission or whatever you want to say of champions and a board for the nonprofits.
A thought comes to mind about, this is grant funds, and
Right.
granted, it's grant funds separate, but would it be permissible to use county grant funds on a nonprofit organization? So I think mixing those two would not be, I think we were very delicate in trying to maintain separation of that organization, in that we will come back to you with an agreement as to how we will work with REACH San Benito. And the champions would be just an extension, another arm to help us with the outreach efforts. And for this grant period, we will work with those champions, but the intent is that they will become partners with REACH San Benito. But we were sensitive to that separation in the grant application when we drafted it up. I worked with the Health Trust to make this fit.
Okay.
I have a question, if Supervisor
ahead.
Mungerstan. Janelle, Parks and Recreation Commission supports this wholeheartedly, the direction that we're taking. They are our advisory group. They're doing a job for us that we've appointed them to do. And so if this is their recommendation and they support this wholeheartedly, then we need to support that effort. They work really hard to try to carry out the wishes of this board, and they're doing a phenomenal job. I'm not going to tie their hands at this point. They've worked too hard.
If I can add one thing, on their agenda tonight, they're going to be reviewing the role of the champion, so that there's some sort of a definition of what is this champion, so that when we go to recruit people who might be interested in becoming a champion, that there's some definition that we can provide to those community members interested in helping us out. So yes, they do support it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And, Mr. Chair, if I can make one last comment. Janelle, I guess I want to address this general tax.
On the
issue-
general tax,
On
I'm
the
sorry.
general tax issue also. If, and that if is a big if we go forward with the general tax, I think the speakers that have said that we need to go with the 1% in the unincorporated areas for general services is going to take precedent over a half-cent sales tax countywide specifically for Parks and Rec. I think the commission probably needs to understand that again, if we go forward with a general tax, it probably needs to be the 1% in the unincorporated
Yeah,
area
that's correct.
in the foreseeable future. And then down the road, maybe we can do the other.
Yeah, the purpose of the general tax, you can't define what the services are going to be, what it's going to be allocated toward.
Yeah.
It's just an opportunity for the community through that general tax public outreach effort to let the supervisors know where the services are that they would like to see.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I just can't support this. I think it's set up to just spend another $21,000 that we weren't able to spend before. Whoever we get as a consultant is going to come back and ask for another $40,000 to complete this study, and we're so close to getting this through, and we need some more money. And wait till we talk a little bit later when we talk about general plan about consultants. And I think this is a great concept, but we're way ahead of its time right now. I rather see us put this away for a while and deal with some of the issues that we have that is really burning out there in this county, and spend our efforts and energies towards that, because this is by far not anywhere near what we should be working on. If we're to do a sales tax, it should be a general tax where we could have unfettered abilities to plug revenue into the priorities that the county has. So I'm not going to support the motion, but anyway, with that, if there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? 1 no. So we'll move on. Thank you, Janelle. And it's no reflection on you, Janelle. It's a great report. We'll move on to the next item. County Council, you want to introduce it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item, agenda item number 35 on today's agenda, is in regards to the seeking the board's approval and authorization to release a request for qualifications known as an RFQ for second-tier indigent defense services. Did the Public Defender Ad Hoc Subcommittee, did you want to make some remarks before?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, I want to thank you, Matt, for this happened very quickly, by the way. We met with Matt. We first met with the public defenders. We met with the judge, public defenders. Then we met with Matt. Then we met again. And so this process happened very quickly, and I appreciate that because we realize that there is a potential savings there. If this is put in place by September the 1st, we could save as much as $100,000. That's a lot of money back into the county coffers. So I want to thank staff, and I think it was you did a great job. I found no fault in the way it was done, and it gives us an opportunity to go out, put it out to private attorneys. They do have to have an office here in San Benito County to offer the services locally, and I think it's a great direction. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're very welcome. And yeah, Supervisor Barrios, really do appreciate everything you did, County Council, on getting this prepared in a timely fashion, and I don't think we could ask for it be any quicker. It's fair. It brings a little bit more equity as far as the cost per case with the first tier and second tier defense.
Yeah.
And that's what the structure provides for, and it kind of makes sure that we're not being taken advantage of, and it gets the judges on a structure as far as appointments of public defenders as well. So is there any questions from the board as far as the
Mr.
item?
Chair.
Supervisor?
Reading the document, when I read it last night, Mr. Chair, I saw that the contract is for $75,000, and I'm looking at the expense that the staff provided us, and it was $190,000 for the second tier conflict. So we have the potential to save about $15,000 just by going into a contract for a second tier.
Ms. Riopol, you could probably answer that, and I got some ideas how to answer it too.
We have some, in looking at the numbers that were projected, and we looked over a few years, and taking just 11, 12, because those numbers were already in, it occurred to us that the number of cases in relation to the expense, that a good portion of it was being expended beyond the first level, beyond the public defender. So how could we shore up that second part of it? I mean, that's, I think, where our objective was all along. So it's really hard to tell, but that's a potential, looking at the numbers.
And I see that's for 1 year, which is a good thing, because then if things don't pan out as we want them to pan out, there's always that options for us to go in a different direction. And what's going to happen, and I guess, staff, on the second tier investigation and the professional witnesses and all the other components, that's going to stay consistent, right?
At the moment, the public defender's contract and the first tier, Mr. Damkar's contract, are in place till June of 2014. However, we are going to go back to Mr. LaForge and Mr. Damkar and attempt to get them to amend their current contract to cap the investigative fees. In our meetings that Supervisor Barrios and Supervisor Botello spoke of, they agreed to do that. So we will, the next step here will be preparing contracts for all of the conflict attorneys to sign, and we will be going back and asking Mr. LaForge and Mr. Damkar to amend their contract.
Okay. So the contract does not have a number of who they can represent. It's just a flat rate. They can see one person, or they can see 100 people.
Yes.
That's a flat rate. That's up to them to be, time managers,
Right.
resource managers. That's their responsibility.
Yes, and what we figured, what Margie, she did the numbers, and by the way, I have to say much of the thanks for this should go to Ms. Riopel. She was a tremendous assistance to me, and without her, I couldn't have done it this quick. So thank you very much, Margie, for your help and assistance. So when we crunched the numbers, it looked like that Mr. LaForge, as the primary public defender, was handling about 1,000 cases. Mr. Damkar, as the first level indigent, was about 400 cases, and this third level or second level would handle about 200 cases, if the statistics stayed consistent.
Okay.
2/3 of our costs went to 1/3 of the cases.
Yes, exactly. Thank you,
And-
Mr. Chair. That is an important thing to point out, and that's why we're limiting it to this amount. We feel that it's doable.
And my final comments on this. No one's going to be denied the right for a public defender, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And Margie, did you want to just briefly address the distribution, who this is going to go to, so the board is aware that it's going to be circulated amongst attorneys inside the county as well as outside the county?
Right. For the development of the distribution list for the RFQ, a number of resources are being used. We look to the California Public Defender Association for some lists. We also went to San Benito County Local Bar Association. We reviewed the San Benito County Directory of Attorneys, and we also went to our Superior Court for a list, so that we can develop a list of local attorneys, also attorneys doing business in San Benito County that are from surrounding counties, and also looked at alternative public defenders' offices in surrounding counties that are already doing this type of work. So those are the where we're going to be focused at on this RFP. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Actually, one more, Mr. Chair, and I apologize, I guess. I'm just thinking, I'm listening to Marge at the same time. I'm just the words of, I think it was Supervisor Barrios or Supervisor Chairman said that 2/3 of all cases handed out by 1/3, and I'm trying to figure out how can that happen? Don't we have the primary and then the main one and then a first tier conflict? Shouldn't they be handling the majority of the cases? Why should 2/3 go down to the second level?
Well, it's actually the cases are split 50-50. So Mr. LaForge and Mr. Damkar handle about half the cases. Or excuse me.
More than that.
Excuse me. The budget is split 50-50. The $1 million is split 50-50. There's $500,000 that goes to Mr. Damkar and Mr. LaForge, and $500,000 that goes to the second tier and down.
Right.
But the inefficiency is Mr. Damkar and Mr. LaForge handle about 90% of the cases. So for handling 90% of the cases, Mr. LaForge and Mr. Damkar get about $500,000. For handling 10% of the cases, the other attorneys get $500,000. That's the inefficiency. So the hope is, with another flat fee contract in place that's going to handle a large amount of that second tier conflict, that $500,000 is going to be reduced substantially.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Anyone from the public want to comment on the public defender item? If not, we'll bring it back to the board for an action.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to authorize the release of the attached request for qualifications for second-tier indigent defense services.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Now we'll move on to the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the next item is item number 36. As you recall, your board requested a general plan update on our June 4th Board of Supervisors meeting. So today, Byron Turner, our interim planning director, will be giving you a general plan update. Byron?
Thank you. Yes, the board requested an update on our progress and how we're going with the general plan. First, I'm going to start with a little history. We are currently in stage 9. So we've done the community workshops and survey, we've done the background report, we've done the alternatives, we selected the preferred alternative, we've come up with a draft general plan and a draft EIR. That EIR was circulated. Now we're in what's stage 9, the public review, where that EIR gets circulated and the public comments on the EIR, and we have to respond to the comments as part of the final EIR and then schedule the public hearings. I should also note there really should be a stage 11 on this chart. That's implementation of the general plan. That's not really reflected here. So we started back in 2007 when we hired Diet and Batya for some public outreach. In 2008 and 2009, Mintier Harnish was hired to handle the next stages of the general plan, and the GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee, was formed. We had 19 GPAC meetings over the course of 2 years. And through that, we prepared the background report and the alternative B, which was selected, which was the combination alternative. If you recall, we had 3 alternatives before the GPAC Planning Commission and Board. In April 2011, the new community study areas were included in alternative B. And in October that year, the draft EIR preparation began. In July of last year, the board directed some more flexibility in the language of the documents. In September, the board directed that the level of service change from C to D with regard to traffic impacts. And then in December of 2012, we approved a second amendment to the Mintier Harnish contract to finish the EIR. And I'll go into that contract a little further later in my presentation. So what we've got now is the EIR has been circulated. That's all part of the CEQA process. We started with scoping, went to the draft EIR, the public review and comment period. The final EIR is the place where we are now, currently underway, where we're responding to comments. The next step is planning commission meetings, which they'll make recommendation to the board, and then we'll go to the board of supervisors for the findings of fact, decision to certify or not to certify the EIR, and consideration of the actual project, adoption of the actual plan.
Can I hold you up right there, Byron? Because I'm concerned how we're, procedurally go through the entire general plan. So do you see that when it goes to the planning commission, is it be pretty much with 1 or 2 meetings, or is it be broke out into elements for,
Really hasn't been decided yet. I think it'd be a stretch to think we could do it in 1 meeting. I would expect that we would go to have 1 meeting, take public comment, take the commission, recommendations, then come back for a second meeting before we get the final direction of the commission. So I would think at least 2 planning commission meetings would be required.
Okay.
But it really hasn't been discussed or decided yet.
All right. We'll probably have discussions after your report on that. I just want to make sure I understood what you had in mind.
So the draft EIR had broke up the document into different conclusions. There's less significant impacts, there's less than significant impacts after mitigation, and there's significant unavoidable impacts. And those are some of the more important ones. Oh, the wrong thing. So the next steps, we need to review and formally respond to agency and public comments. We need to prepare and circulate the final EIR. We need the Planning Commission to review the EIR. The board needs to consider the EIR and the general plan. We need to prepare the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. We need to prepare the findings of fact and the statement of overriding considerations. That's for the significant and unavoidable impacts. And we need to then have the final board meeting on the program EIR and 2035 general plan. So previous actions, I said I'd come back to that contract. In December 2012, the board authorized an additional $67,000 to the consultants to complete the task of preparing the draft environmental impact report. As part of this agreement, it was going to be staff's responsibility to do the bulk of the work in preparing the final EIR, which consists of primarily of responding to the comments. We've got approximately 45 comment letters as a result of circulation. Just briefly, some of the comments, we've got a lot of comments. I just wanted to touch on a couple, not necessarily weighted in any way, shape, or form, but just to give you an idea what kind of comments we got. We've got concern over adequate mitigation at railroad crossings and intersections. We've got consistency and conflicts with Caltrans standards regarding the level of service. We've got concerns over greenhouse gas emissions and air modeling assumptions, both from the lack of analysis side as well as assertions that it was overanalyzed. We've got concern over policies that could lead to the loss of agricultural and open space, concern over the lack of analysis in the new community study areas. We've got specific questions and requests regarding specific pieces of land. In the past, and as we were going through the GPAC, planning would get specific requests. I would like this property to be considered this, I'd like that property to be considered that. The county has yet to really do anything about those requests. The GPAC said we're not going to address these requests at this time. That's something for the Planning Commission. So when we get to the Planning Commission, we're going to have requests for specific policies, specific tracts of land to be not rezoned, but re-identified as different as general plan. You'll probably hear some of that today. It's ongoing, and I did recommend for people, who have those concerns to continue to come to these meetings and get out the concerns so that you are able to hear them. We've got requests for further analysis of the differences between this and the previous general plan. We've got concerns over the accuracy of the population projections. As you know, the population projections have shifted over the years that we have been doing this, and the land use, housing, and transportation assumptions. This next comment I'm going to dwell on for a minute because it's two comments in one. We've got deficient policies and mitigations to protect the environment, and then a different comment, policies that are overprotective of the environment and could hurt business. This is where it's going to get difficult to respond to these comments because you've got different viewpoints. If the comment was simply your policies and mitigations to protect the environment are deficient, our response to that comment could be to strengthen the policy. If it was simply the other comment, then our response to that comment would be to open it up a little, make it a little more free. In fact, it's going to be difficult to find a way to appease one side or the other without one side saying, wait a minute, we told you that your mitigations were deficient, and now you're making now you're even reducing mitigations. And the same problem with the other side, where this is too much, and now you're making it worse to appease the other side. So that's why this response to comments is a crucial point, and one of the things I want to talk to you about today. Now, many requests to change the draft environmental impact report, regardless of the source, possibly will require recirculation of the document, resulting in additional time and cost. Now, I said before that part of the agreement with the consultant was that staff would now handle the comments, the responses to comments. They would finish the document, circulate it, and staff would do the comments. Well, county staff has also changed significantly since that time. Most notably, the resignation of the planning director and the senior planner, as well as the loss of the engineer in public works who was responsible for the traffic comments.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? And right here at this point, since we're discussing this, I thought that Mintier and Harnish was going to do some of the comments on the draft DIR.
There's a couple that I'm going to, there are some of the comments that they're handling. For instance, greenhouse gases, and I'll actually come to that shortly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So The challenges that we have here are lack of staff, the technical nature of the comments, and now is when I was actually going to point out the greenhouse gas specifically. That's being handled by the consultant, and they are also going to address the issue over the cattle reduction. That seems to be a big, people have picked up on that. They're going to fix that portion of it. We've got someone on board. They see where the math got funny, and they're going to change that altogether. So we don't have to, that's not being handled by staff, that's being handled by the consultant. We also have an increased workload at the planning department now. We actually are moving forward at a pretty good clip as far as taking in projects to the point where applicants are very concerned about our ability to process their applications. And I do want to take a moment on behalf of some of the applicants. It's the mid-range projects, the minor projects, the senior seconds and the lot line adjustments, those we're able to process with our limited staff. They're not that complicated for the most part. We're able to keep a full planning commission schedule. There's always items in the planning commission. The large projects, there's not a whole lot of concern about those either because they know what they're doing. You know, the Del Webb project at San Juan Oaks, we've got, you know, a very qualified team working on that. It's the minor, it's use permits for a lettuce processing plant, zone changes. We've got some projects that are starting to become a backlog in the planning department, and the board needs to be aware of that as we talk about how to distribute the work in the future as we go. And I bring this up because if we focus on, as we focus on comments, it reduces our ability to process applications. Up to this point, and I'll be you know, completely honest with this board right now, we are trying to process the applications ahead of responding to the comments. Those people come in with, they pay their check, they pay their money, and they expect their project to be processed in a timely manner. And if it doesn't require the general plan amendment, they don't see the need to wait. In discussions with the consultants, similar, if we had and this is not a direct quote, but similar responses to comments from Merced County, which recently went through this process, was approximately $51,000. That's what was charged by the consultant to Merced County for responses to comments, only if they were to break that out. In a perfect world, I think that's who we would want to respond to the comments, because the comments are on the consultant's document, because they're the ones who are qualified. They made the assumptions. They're the ones who are qualified to respond to the comments. Other consultants, additional planning staff, like I said, while staff would not recommend hiring anyone not already involved in the general plan update to respond to comments, the county could contract with outside consultants to assist in staffing of the planning department. Multiple project applicants have expressed interest to planning to hire outside consultants to assist in processing the applications. So I would want to meet with, if we got authorization to go down that path, I'd want to meet with the CAO and the HR department and county council about how to make that happen, contracting with applicants to assist in staffing planning, whether it's helping respond to comments or processing their application. So essentially, that's pretty much the extent of my presentation at this point. The purpose was to provide you with an update. I want to let you know the challenges that we're facing right now as a county and as the planning department. And you know, the project documents are all available online, and they're there. And I seek, I want to give you an update. Looking forward to hearing what the public has to say, and any direction that the board can give at this time would certainly be appreciated.
Can we go back, Mr. Chair, to two screens? Two screens back. I want to see other consultants, additional planning staff. The county could contract with outside consultants to assist staffing the planning department, but that would not necessarily be to get these consultants to finish the general plan. This would be just for application process. Is that what you mean by that comment?
That's what I generally mean by that. However, I would like to work with HR to see if there's a way we could assist with comments as well. It all depends on on the contract. If the language in the contract says that they're going to be working on a specific project, then that's the project they'll be working on.
Okay.
Right now, we have consultants that work on specific projects, and you know, you see contracts every session. this is what this consultant will be working on. It would have to be something more open-ended if we wanted them to assist us with responding to comments. But that's why I would need HR's involvement and legal's involvement.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Rivas.
So Byron, those options up there, I mean, when I look at the general plan, you know, we don't even have cost to get copies ourselves of these plans.
No.
I have to read them on my computer. I'm going blind. You know, I have all these copies everywhere. It's ridiculous. But I tell you, I've gotten calls not only from my district but throughout the county. And I look at the history, and I think the biggest blunder in this whole history is the hiring of Mintier and Harnish. And they're a problem. I mean, what if we cut our losses and we get a new consultant to finish steps 9, 10, and 11? Is that out of the question?
No?
I mean, because this thing is a mess. It's a mess because of our consultants. I'm sorry, but I mean that's the truth. I got into this process late, after in 2011, and I see that GPAC had 19 meetings, and then in April 2011, we had alternative B, the study areas. So you're telling me that none of that was discussed during the 19 GPAC meetings? I mean.
The new community study area was relatively new. That's something that came out later.
And I've met with a whole bunch of interest groups, local interest groups, some developers, some environmentalists, and they all have problems with this document. And I agree with a lot of what they have to say. I mean, there's a lot of inconsistencies in the document. I think clearly when I look at a general plan, our plan, it calls for a balance between a commercial and residential growth and development. And I just think that there is no balance in this document. When I look at different maps and whatnot, I just think when I look at, I'm certainly one supervisor, but when I look at the needs in our county, we're sitting here about half cents our sales tax for parks and rec and for libraries. For me, what it comes down to is expanding our economic base. And so when I look at was the section on economic development, I just think that it's underwhelming when it comes to attracting new business. When we have a wine corridor which is a great, it's a great concept, but it's extremely, it's not enough. How come we haven't incorporated more of the county in that wine corridor? When I look at, the fact that we want to create new jobs, it's just, like I said, when I look at the map at the industrial, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place here, our, what's it called, like the commercial zoning, unless I zoom in 100 times, I see little specks here and there, but it's underwhelming. It's like we need more. And so I think we have to cut our losses. We get rid of this Mintier and Harnish, and we get a request for a proposal, and hopefully get someone local on the job, because this is it's not good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Rivas. Any other supervisors before I say something? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think I'd just like to
Okay.
hear from the public. And
Supervisor.
and then-
Okay. Myself, I agree with Supervisor Rivas. I kind of felt that way back in January when we gave him the $67,000, and today I promised myself I'm not going to get mad. And
You're not going to scream?
I'm not going to get mad. But I just want to see this project through, and I'm up to this point disappointed. I think the board needs to understand that's going to cost us some more money. I don't think that there's any question that we do need additional consultant work, but I will never support that Mitnier and Harnish. They have messed this up from the start. Handling the GPAC committee, I think they discounted a lot of input from that committee and direction. And shoot, they're not even here today, I don't think. That should tell us something right there. They might be waiting at the mailbox, waiting for their last check, is what I think. But we have a lot of problems that need to be resolved, and I wish I shared your optimism, Mr. Turner, that we could get this through 2 planning commission meetings. I don't think that's a happen because there is some policies that really need to be reviewed and handled through a public process, both at the planning commission level and at our level. Namely, I'd like to make sure this community understands whether or not we want the community study areas. I think some of those areas are ill-conceived within this general plan. I think the other areas that is a problem is the balance of residential and job creation in this county, and we could do better. It was too easy for this consultant to just say, oh, well, we'll just go and even lower that ratio even more so. That's not the case. I believe residential development will do a general plan amendment, and that's what it calls for within the special study areas. For if a developer comes forward, they still have to do a general plan amendment. Whereas if industrial growth or business growth, highway commercial, needs the zoning in place. I think when we open up public comment, my friend Jim West will probably get up and speak about his experience as far as putting industrial zoning adjacent to, the quarry and Aromas on a rail line. And it's not in this general plan. And it's very foolish for this county to move forward with the general plan without that zoning in place. And how it's not there is, I'm scared to ask why it's not there and find out the answer. I think that another person indicated, the potential on the southern side of Hollister going down Airline Highway to Tres Pinas. That could be a mixed use area, and that's not there. I would just like to see that we do have everything that the public wants to see, and we need a little bit more time and a little bit more effort, and it's a take more than maybe 2 planning commission meetings, another consultant that knows what the heck they're doing or paying attention to our project rather than Merced counties. And if I had it my way, I know nobody would support that, but if I won the lottery, I'd sure get a good lawyer and sue this consultant for non-performance. But I know that it probably won't happen. Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too like to hear from the public, but I just got a comment. I guess there's a push to get rid of them, I guess. And right away, I just started thinking to myself. I go, what could happen? Does that mean it's all over again? I mean, we're all starting all over again. Does everything becomes fair game? Do we go back and have a series of 15, 20 planning commission meetings? I just a little concerned about that, is that we might open up an opportunity for more data collection, more how do you spell the? There's just all those opportunities that could present itself. We're just going to push forward and get momentum today to get rid of these individuals and then address issues that doesn't require a supplemental or even additional time that we're already, want to get this done as soon as possible.
That's a good question. With that, why don't we go ahead and hear from the public?
Marvin Jones.
Mr. Jones, would you like
Usually we just have the clerk pass them out, but
This is page 1-4 of the general plan. Shows what is required by law, what is not required by law, which are optional. I've got an extra one here if somebody wants it. You need another one? All right. And that, again, you got 7 elements that are required by law. Housing is kind of special. Brian mentioned this morning in the report, and that another housing element has to be completed in just a couple of years. I was looking at the land use element. 2.1, sustainable building practices. 3.3, increased agricultural sustainability and energy efficiency. 6.4, sustainable technologies. 8.5, sustainable new communities. You know, this morning we found some things that are not sustainable, like row crops and cattle ranches and air conditioning. And that there is a common thread there. Then bouncing back to land use 4.4, multiple use residence. We heard this morning that the single family residences are not sustainable. And so now we've got multiple use families. Hollister's a little bit ahead of San Benito County. If you are familiar with the apartments over at Park Street, Prospect, nice apartments, nice front yard for kids to play or old folks to sit out in the sunshine soaking them up. They're kind of old. They're not sustainable anymore. Hollister's newest ones are down on 4th Street at West Side, the Stack and Pack, the four stories of apartments there, which is sustainable from what we heard this morning and previously. Health and safety element. That includes both the safety and noise requirements. In the first 4 sections of health and safety in your general plan, the noise and safety are covered. Then you get into section 5. Sounds like an optional one there because it's not required in that it is air quality. That's not one of the required elements. If you look at health safety element 5.1, health safety element 5.3, they both do with new development. They say that you will get permission from a Monterey Bay Unified Air Pollution Control District before you approve any development. That's what it reads. Read your general plan before you vote on it. You're going to abdicate your responsibility? That way you won't be responsible. It'll be the Monterey Bay Area Unified Air Control Board that will be responsible for it. You've got 5.7, greenhouse gas emission reductions. 5.8, the target's there, 20% below 1990. I'll wrap up real quick here. Greenhouse gases have been increasing about 1% a year, as you heard a couple of months ago. If you assume 2% a year, 20% of 1990 level will be sometime between 1910 and 1920. That will be the amount of industry and activity you have going on here. At health safety section 5.
Anyway, we have probably quite a few speakers, Mark.
I'll wrap up by saying with the health and safety section 5 being optional, you ought to delete the thing in its entirety. That'll get rid of your 80% reduction in cattle. It'll get rid of some of your cost overrun. Just delete the thing. It's not required. It's optional.
Okay. Thank you.
Jason Noble?
Good afternoon, Jason Noble, Trespinos. Through an oversight in the preparation of the general plan update, there is an area of San Benito County which deserves further consideration. In 1992, LAFCO adopted the sphere of influence for the Trespinos Sewer and Water District. This would be the appropriate time to expand the urban limits of the Trespinos Sewer and Water District by including those properties located in their sphere of influence. Consistent with the 2035 general plan guiding principles, expansion of the urban limits of the district to zoning of residential mixed would encourage growth in the existing unincorporated community of Trespinos. Near a state highway and a school, it would also enhance the opportunities for the commercial component of Trespinos, Bellato Park Golf Course, County Historical Park, and Bellato Park, to name just a few close by. It does not reduce prime agriculture lands, as these properties are typically grazing lands not yielding high production and have already been identified by LAFCO over 20 years ago as lands that should be served by the district. Also consistent with the land use element of the general plan, Encouraging growth in the existing unincorporated community of Tres Pinos, it discourages urban sprawl since the Tres Pinos sphere of influence properties are limited geographically by the direction they may expand. I would ask that the Board of Supervisors direct staff to include the expansion of the urban limits for the Tres Pinos Sewer and Water District to their adjacent lands within their sphere of influence in the general plan update today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marty Richmond?
Marty Richmond from Hollister. First of all, I want to thank chairman, members of the board, because you have to sit through this. I can always go home if I've had enough. I'm surprised you haven't had enough already of the general plan, maybe 10 times over. I don't know how much we've got invested in this general plan, but whatever it is, it's just a waste of money. Here's my problem. We're going to take a bunch of projections that we know are not right, not even close to right. How do we know? All we have to do is look back at the former sets of projections, and they were always wrong. So all of a sudden, maybe the projection people will get lucky and the projections will be right on. But the idea that there's any skill involved in this is a farce. So we're going to take a bunch of projections that we know have no relationship to what's really going to happen. And we are going to build, many years into the future, a general plan around those projections, and each side will use it to beat the brains out of the other side on what they can do and what they can't do. You're going to make those. If you make a mistake on this general plan in the philosophy, you are just going to light a stick of dynamite, tuck it underneath your desk for 15 years. The idea that, oh, you will just do a general plan change, or we'll just do an update, that's going to be a mini shot at what you got now, maybe worse, okay? It may cost twice as much per page as it costs now, whatever that is. So I have one overriding principle for you. You meet the minimum legal requirement, stay as flexible as possible within that requirement, because no one knows what it's going to be like 5 years from now, much less 15. I've heard 1,000 times from 1,000 boards, we didn't know the housing crash was coming. I've heard 1,000 times from 1,000 boards, oh, we made a mistake when we put this here and we put that there, and we didn't know that was going to happen. We don't know what kind of businesses we were going to get, and we didn't know where they want to be. The idea that we could put together a plan based on those projections that really would tell people where they should do things is preposterous. They will come down here and they will say, well, we don't want to be here. We want to be somewhere else. And what are we going to say? Oh, no, take your 400 jobs and go away. We're not interested. That's not going to happen. The same thing goes for housing. It will be what it will be based on what happens in the world. So I think what you ought to do is meet the minimum legal requirements, stay as flexible as possible, write the plan that way, and as the projects come up, evaluate them using your philosophy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. No other speakers? I knew we had some more.
My name is Jim West. I live in San Juan Bautista. I also work for Granite Rock. I was the vice chair of the Citizen Advisory Committee for 2 years, 19 meetings. When we talked about that, and I only care about industrial growth. I don't do houses. Excuse me. We have a piece of land next to our quarry in Aromas that is on the rail line, the only rail line that can hauls our rail cars out, 100 tons apiece. That property should be zoned heavy industrial. It's right next to our, in fact, if you've got a map in your thing, you'll see a big purple blob, which is Granite Rock in the northwest corner of the county. The proposal that we talked about at the GPAC was probably 1/4 that size. It was running on either side of Quarry Road from our quarry to the county line. All of that land on the south side of that road, we can run there's 4 lines. 2 owns by the railroad, 2 are spurs by Granite Rock. We can run our spurs into that property, put 8 to 10 tilt-ups in there for heavy construction equipment, for heavy manufacturing that can go out on rails, precast concrete, tiles, stuff like that. These are good jobs. These are union jobs. These bring a lot of money into the county. When I sat on that committee, I talked about it, and I told them, I said, Granite Rock owns about 15% of that frontage land. The rest is owned by Driscoll and a number of other independents. So we're not the major property owner by any means in there. But we put it in the plan. It was in the plan, and all of the GPAC members voted for it. And then when it went in front of the Planning Commission, it was in the plan. It was there. It was all colored in. And we went to the Board of Supervisors at the same time. And then a few months ago, I looked at it. It's gone. It was gone. What happened to it? You know, we talk about the general plan and a blueprint for building. The general plan does another thing. For years, we've tried to interest people in developing out there, and the consensus in the industrial community in Central California is that you cannot get zoning in San Benito County for industrial use. They don't want us. For 20 years, they've thrown us out. They put every road block up in the world. You can't do it. So the same way the county has the resource recovery, you know, we'll put it there. Then people say, hey, I can put my stuff there. Whatever project Granite Rock or Driscoll's or any one of those people in that proposed heavy industrial project do, they're going to have to come in with a use permit. They're going to have to come in with a general plan. They're going to have to come in with an EIR. They're going to have to, not a general plan, a use permit and an environmental impact report. But right now, you cannot get anyone to look at that property. It's the only property we have on the main line. It's got the great transportation corridors. The general plan is a way of telling a community, and in this case, the industrial community, we are receptive to your business. And that should be in there, and we should use the general plan to promote our business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Joe Zanger, Northern San Benito County grape growing region, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. There's a generous, large area for the viticultural and hospitality overlay, which I think is really great. It goes, you know, it starts from San Juan Bautista and heads all the way east to Fremont's Peak, and then heads south through all that brush and east of Hollister Hills, and then down south to Piscinas, and then it circles around and grabs a bunch of east of Fairview area, and I think that's all good. Probably I'm as much to blame as anyone because I wasn't involved in the process over the last 4 or 5 years. But the northern part of the county where we do grow grapes, where we had a viticultural area, American viticultural area designated since 1984, that wasn't included. And so it was called to my attention just in early May. And so I did send it, I went to the general plan website, and it said to send comments to Gary Armstrong via email. And so I did, and I copied the supervisors. I have not heard back. I have not heard back from Gary acknowledging that, or the department. I don't believe that they received it, and it will be part of. It's a comment. It will be part of. It will be answered. So I just want to be sure that it was received, and that I think northern San Benito County was just overlooked as another grape growing region, part of the county, with the history. I think it was just overlooked. There wasn't anything devious there, I don't believe. So I'm just here today speaking for that, and whatever I can do to help facilitate that, maybe be part of it. If there's any new discussion groups, I'll be glad to speak up this time around to be sure that our area at the county line gets the attention it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Hi, I'm Larry Barr. Most of the supervisors here know me pretty well. I'm current president of the San Benito Business Council, and we have a few comments to make. But first of all, I'd like to say, Robert, it was a pleasure to hear you speak just before this comment session, because I finally have somebody that gets it. And now that I say that, I'm going to recommend that you spend a little more money. But, but maybe what we should be considering is the first consultants had a lot of inaccuracies in this document, a lot of misrepresentations. I say you get that money by back-charging them. In my company, where I work, if a vendor supplies a part that isn't right, we back-charge them to make that right. We ought to do the same here, if the contract allows it. But I'd at least try it, send them a bill. So, the San Benito Business Council has reviewed and commented on the 2035 General Plan Draft and Environmental Impact Report and policy document. We'd like to commend the county on its planning efforts and environmental analysis and right to offer suggestions on ways to strengthen the environmental analysis while providing the county with the flexibility for future planning efforts. Our intentions are to strike a balance between the need to sustain and protect important resources, which we support, with the need to permit the county to thrive, expand and enhance the community job base, improve the economic climate, support the superior quality of life, and actively contribute to the well-being of the communities within San Benito County. At this point in the process, given the unsatisfactory performance by the current consultant team, we agree that additional support and options are needed to get the process back on track. The Business Council requests that you direct staff to prepare a request for proposal for a new consultant not vested with their own product, or to a local or Central Coast consultant for sealed bids to undertake the following tasks. Identify changes to the general plan to ensure consistency with the prior board direction. Prepare the final EIR, individual responses to comments, and making any required changes to the EIR or general plan based on these comments. Third, attend public hearings and coordinating with planning staff on preparing resolutions and findings of the fact. Correct the gross inaccuracies currently in the plan. To echo our submitted comments, the general plan is a document that will guide the investment and growth for the next 20 years or more. There will be many different types of projects proposed over that time. Each of these proposals will have different site constraints and opportunities. If the general plan policies are flexible rather than rigid, the county will be able to consider the many important factors of individual proposals, including the site, type of proposal, current county needs, and available technology, which going into making land decisions. The results will be...
to finishing, Larry? Or
I could go on, but I've got one or two more sentences.
If we could, it's important, and go ahead.
The results will be intelligently planned growth that conforms to the county's vision, but which is less vulnerable to legal attack by third parties. We must get this process back on track. And I'm here to tell you, I hate to spend more money, but it looks like we have no choice at this point due to the lack of performance by the current consultants.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Share that myself.
Good evening. Good afternoon. It's gone a long day. My name is Bill Wiseman. I'm here on behalf of Lico Greco Properties. So as Byron was talking earlier, I represent an interest that there was discussion about some specific properties and changes that were recommended. There's two properties that we've been providing communication to the GPAC and discussions with Gary Armstrong and Byron and to your board. And the first one, I'm going to start from the south, and it's what we call, it's along Enterprise Road. It's essentially southwest of 25 and Union. It's about 100 acres, and we actually, back in November of 2010, prepared a conceptual land use plan to look at redesignating that property. And there's a number of reasons why the applicant, I shouldn't say they're not an applicant, the interested party believes that that's a good candidate site for changing the land use designations. And I won't go through them. I did submit this packet to, on behalf of LECO to you, so it's in your materials. Hopefully you receive them. But there's a lot of good reasons. It's close to infrastructure, it's close to roads, it's next to the city limits. It would accommodate some housing element needs that you have for accommodating, et cetera. There's a lot of good reasons for that. The other is the property that is southwest of San Felipe Road and 156. It's industrial. Well, we've proposed that it be looked at from a land use standpoint for industrial land. It's currently agricultural. It's got Santa Ana Creek on the outer edge. And that is an area that where, again, there's been no change and there wasn't anything reflected in the process as it went through. And I think Byron noted that the GPAC had made some recommendations and they didn't get addressed. So I just want to, for the record, note those changes. I think from a broader perspective, both to the supervisors there, Rivas and Patello, you touched on dissatisfaction and the degree of change. I think one thing that I just note generally as a consultant, 30 years in the business and preparing general plans is Byron talked about looking at what changes and taking those changes to your planning commission. There is a risk, and you really need to think strategically, is the big picture when those changes come about, because what you don't want to do is go through this process, answer all these response to comments, go to the planning commission, and then start to address those land use changes because you're going to have to recirculate. My impression is that from what I'm hearing and the fact that there are a lot of properties that may have some changes, that there's a good chance that you may have to recirculate this EIR. So just in the interest of your cost, you don't want to do that later. It'll be even more painful. So I feel your pain. I'm doing a general plan with Capitola right now, and there's, these things are not easy, but having a good local consultant does help a lot. I understand that, and I know from experience. So appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much for taking the time. Anyone else? Did we fix the cattle thing?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay, we're advocating more cattle.
I'd do that if I were you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about greenhouse gas. My name's John Eade. I am in the cattle business. I'm from Santa Ana Valley. And I just want to make a few quick points. Your esteemed consultant used the cattle that were sold in the county in 2010, which is 35,800, not the resident herd. And then they deducted that down to 6,988 in the year 2035, and that's what they based the 65,000 metric ton equivalent of greenhouse gas savings that would allow all the rest of the county to go ahead and build and do what they wanted because you would be below the standard. So there'd be no significant impact. That's the key word. Anyway, getting back to stark reality, right now you're going to get new numbers. You're going to have between 60 and 70,000 head of cattle. That's the resident herd. It's probably been that for 100 years, give or take 10 or 20,000 head based on weather and price fluctuations. And what you need to start figuring on and telling whether you hire these fraudulent people that did the first one or you get some new people, tell them you better plan on figuring on between 125 and 250,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, because that's what you're going to have to mitigate. Let me assure you, nobody in the county is going to be able to say there's no significant impact with all the activity you're going to do. But be thinking about that number. You're not saving 65,000 like they did by getting rid of all the cattle. You're going to have to figure on dealing with 150, 200,000 tons. Thank you.
Thank you. Honestly, don't understand why we're even talking about this, but I appreciate the comments. Anyone else from the public? Former Supervisor Lowe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Hearing the frustrations today, I wasn't going to speak, but I think since we are talking about maybe bringing on a new consultant, one of the things you have to look at when you decide who you're going to give this new job to or new task, if you decide to do that, is somebody that has the big vision of economic development, somebody who specializes in the zoning of areas, large areas, that we can encourage. What we need to have in this general plan is telling people that we're open for business and we want industrial growth, we want commercial growth, and we want it in these areas. And it's already in the general plan and zoned that way. So they come in with a head start. They don't have to go through zone changes, general plan changes. It's there. It's encouraging. And I think if you're going to move forward and changing your consultant and looking at the plan, you've got to have that in the new plan, and you have to have large areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point. Anyone else? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Comments?
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Munzer?
Start. Well, first of all, I want to go on record that I do not want to solve our greenhouse gas emissions on the back of the cattle industry. That needs to be taken care of first off. I also want to go on record that I agree with Tres Pinos, which is already a community that has infrastructure, should be included. Their sphere of influence should be included in our plan development. Heavy industry in the Aromas area is also something that should be part of the plan. You know, kind of both what Jim West said and former Supervisor Lowe said. We need to plan for jobs. I too agree that I don't think we got what we asked for. I know a year ago in Byron's presentation, July of 2012, the board directed more flexibility in the language. The general plan that I have on my computer screen does not have that flexibility in the language. They did not follow our direction as far as I'm concerned, even from a year ago. I would support going out for an RFP for a new consultant to finish up the last 2 or 3 steps that we need, steps 9, 10, and 11, making sure that the other steps have been done the way we wanted it and directed it to be done, and get this thing done and put to bed.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Barrios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was informed, and I'm sure that this is true, I don't think it was made up, that Monterey County is actually spending millions upon millions of dollars, or will be spending millions of dollars, on writing ordinances that the general plan that was prepared for them pretty much directs. And so obviously that was not a flexible general plan, it was a specific general plan. We need to make sure that ours is not specific. We need to make sure that 10 years from now, if there's another board sitting right here, another makeup of people and board representing this county, that their hands are not tied, that they don't have to spend a lot of money, that they can be, we gave direction to Mintier and Harnish back in a year ago, that we wanted this to be a flexible, it is a general plan, that is the name of it, general. And they didn't do it. They didn't pay attention. And they didn't pay attention to GPAC. We should have fired them a while ago. but we didn't. We try to make it work. It hasn't worked, and so I will have to say that I will support Supervisor Rivas's idea of going out, putting out an RFQ, and see where we go, and see if we can get this finished for a minimal amount of dollars, rather than going forward and then later on spending millions of dollars trying to correct it. So I made note of all the ideas that came forth from the community, and I also want to say that Supervisor De La Cruz and I were appointed to a general plan committee in 2012. We met a few times, but I specifically went to the planning department and spoke with Byron and Gary, and they were very supportive of the ideas that I had. Very simple things. For a general plan, you don't want to put the word require. You want to use the word encourage. You don't want to put shall and will and must. That is specific. That will create ordinances that will get us in trouble, or that money-wise. And they really, I believe that they followed through, and they went to Mintier and Harnish and said, hey, these are simple, you can change them. They weren't done. So we need to move in a different direction, and I will support that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Barrios. Supervisor Rivas, do you have anything further to add?
I don't have any additional comments, but I'm ready to make a motion.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
I already said my comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I know, I think I've been involved in things in the county for quite some time, and I remember back in 1996, I was appointed to the Planning Commission, and in the interview I had with the freelance, top priority, that I'd like to see the county move towards was a general plan revision back then, and the board allocated, I don't know, $500,000, and it just never got done. And it's reassuring that I think all 5 of us are pretty much on the same page as far as hoping to make sure that our future general plan revision has the flexibility in place that will provide for future boards and in our community to grow in a responsible fashion, and also accommodate the jobs creation zoning that needs to be in there now. It's not there. There's not enough. And we heard from 2 GPAC members. It's like they never attended not one of those 19 meetings. Go figure. I really have a bitter taste in my mouth with our consultant. That's no secret, and I hope he never uses San Diego County as a reference of doing a general plan, because I think it would be just terrible. But it still does, we need to get a consultant in place. I think we also need to explore having somebody down in planning to assist our director, overseeing that consultant and coordinating the public outreach that still needs to take place, and review for some of these boundaries and zoning designations. I think Joe Zanger brought up a good point about the wine trail. I think that needs to be reviewed. I think our procedural procedure should be reviewed for the general plan amendments if the specific plan areas go forward, or these planned communities, whether or not that's a wise thing to have in the general plan revision right now or not. Are we is our environmental processes adequate to support that? I don't think so. I adamantly feel that they aren't, but I want the public to be involved in expressing whether those areas, all of them or some of them, should be maybe taken out. But we need a consultant, we need adequate staff to go through this, we need public input, and it's going to take some time and a little bit more money. Okay, Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate what was just said, and I only want to add to that I think that when we look at the consultant, we certainly can point all our fingers at the consultant, but I think there's a certain level of responsibility at our staff level. And although Mr. Armstrong still isn't here, I think our interim, our director now certainly understands what needs to happen. And so then I'm going to look for his leadership in moving forward as well. Because I think, if anything, Mr. Armstrong, he deserves at least a phone call and a little lashing himself, because we need our staff to stand up for our ideas and for our interest groups and our constituents and our residents.
Yes.
Because in the end, we need to get this thing done, and I think it's going to take a certain amount of will on staff's part. And I expect our director to work with our new consultants and to really make sure that what we say here gets done, and that we don't have to come back again and have to get these calls that things aren't getting accomplished. And so I'm looking for more leadership from our staff, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So with that, I am ready to make a motion if you're ready.
I have a question. I'll come back to you for your motion. Go ahead, Supervisor De La Cruz.
I guess I didn't hear the magic words when the questions that I asked earlier, and that is, those are, what time frame am I looking here? How much more time is this going to be added? What's going to be the responsibility? What kind of makeup are we thinking at in terms of when they come for us to approve a proposal and then bid it out? That's very important for me, because I really do not want to go beyond this year.
We can incorporate timeframes into the proposal. And, if you can't make those timeframes, we've done that with other projects. If you can't make these timeframes, you don't need to interview with us. And if I'm hearing that you correctly, the end of the year is your timeframe there.
All right, I just want to make sure. Well, I don't even know if that's the target number.
And I can't tell you that that's feasible, but we'd have to wait and see.
That's what I was going to ask, Mr. Chair. Is it realistic? I don't know.
Supervisor Munzer?
Respecting that Supervisor Rivas is ready to make a motion, do we need to maybe go one more meeting, the 23rd or the first meeting in August, and have staff come back to us with a proposal to sit there and tell us what's going to be included in the RFQ, RFP, whichever the initials are, what the time frame's going to be, what we think the dollar amount's going to be. Let staff, work with our NMCAO, whoever he needs to work with, and come back with a plan to us.
Supervisor Rivas?
Well, I was going to move that our board, we direct staff, our planning staff and our county council office to work on ending the relationship with Mintier Harnish, and then come back to our board with an RFP plan, exactly what Supervisor Munzer said as far as what our next steps are, so.
Mr. Chair, I have a question moving forward with that idea of severing the relationship with Mintier and Harnish. Do we still owe them money? Do we have a potential savings there?
$6,784. I remember that stinging in my head. I wanted more, but it was 10% of the contract, whatever the 10%.
I don't remember that number.
Yeah, my understanding was there was some money left, which they were going to use to respond to the technical comments. I'm not, Byron, do you remember how much?
There was some left over for response to technical comments, and that's actually going on right now. So that's one of the moving parts here, to find out. I don't want to stop the person who's fixing the greenhouse gas. I don't want to stop them from working. So to find out where that money is allocated, but we have essentially ended our relationship already. We've said this is their final payment, and this is what the final product's going to be, with the exception of there may be some left over that they had reserved for attending public hearings, or like Matt said, the technical comments. So that's something I'll have to find out exactly.
Yeah, and I think we need to, because any savings that we can have, we need to get that money back to move forward with this idea. So.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the motion, if you care to repeat it, Supervisor Rivas,
is
please.
To direct our planning staff and our county council office to work together to end the relationship with Mintier and Harnish, such as, if there's money we have to get back, we'll get it back. As far as the greenhouse gases, hopefully staff can work that out as far as, how and when we can end that relationship that's best for our county. Then staff can come back to our board with our next steps as far as a new RFP process and
All right.
moving forward.
Okay, and Supervisor De La Cruz second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. We'll move on to item 37.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This particular item was brought to your board on June 4th. You did receive a report from the Facilities Committee, an evaluation criteria, basically allowing some of the departments that need of space or allocating for workflow purposes the courthouse to be able to occupy. We then suggested to go ahead and give your board the questionnaire that we handed out to the department heads so that you could review the criteria that they had filled out, and so that way they can so those 4 items that we have handed out for you today, again, what we handed out on June 4th, you'll be able to see and quantify those 4 items. Today, what we want your board to do is to discuss those items, as well as be able to weight those values. I don't know if Supervisor Barrios or Supervisor Botello has any input with that, but other than, we just want to go ahead and be able to get a value with those 4 items that we have, a weighted value, so that way we can go ahead and
Yeah, and I think, Mr. Chair, the last time that we met regarding this item, that was the desire of the majority of the board, that they wanted to get a little more detail and that see it in a format that they can have greater input. And we were open to that, and hence the meeting today, the item today.
Yes, and what you were just handed is the questionnaire that was originally sent out by the CAO's office several months ago. I believe you got an emailed copy of that after the last meeting, but it wasn't in the packet here, so we just want to make sure you had a hard copy here in front of you. So that's what was sent to the other departments, and based on their responses, that's what we need to decide, who has the most need.
Mr. Chair, I know that I was one of those supervisors that kind of wanted to get more into it, and I kind of started talking to some other departments and other individuals, and there's a need out there, and that facility out there can provide a lot of needs. So, kudos to the committee, to the staff, and I think we need to start moving forward with the idea.
Thank you, Supervisor De La Cruz. Any other comments?
Well, yeah, I guess, again, what we're looking for is, the input from the board on the importance of each of these factors, or if there are any additional factors that you may have thought of that we may have missed.
And that would be the rating, how many points, what we think has more value, I guess.
What's the most important thing?
What is the most important thing to us?
Cash,
and
baby.
That's right.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to just give an example. I know this was provided at the Facilities Committee meeting. The ability to provide revenue, maximum points, let's just say 40. The potential liability due to existing conditions, 30 maximum points. Efficiency to gain by additional square footage, 10. Efficiency to be gained by proximity of other departments, 20. So that was an example. And basically what we're requesting from your board is to weigh in on that point value, what you feel is the most importance.
So you like this form a little bit better to work with? I think it adds a little bit more detail.
One of the things, Mr. Chair, that I would like to find out is that we were going to have Trindle assess the building for potential liability due to the existing conditions. Have they done that yet, or is that something that will happen?
That's
Mr. Chair.
something. Oh, go ahead.
Actually, that has not happened yet. We will be having Trindle come out here to do an evaluation. So it'll happen probably in the next few weeks. It'll probably be the following facility committee meeting when we discuss that.
And then I have a question, Mr. Chair, on the ability to provide revenue, rent payments. We have the assessor's office there now, the tax collector, treasurer, that will probably stay, and the recorders, and what is the other department that's there that will stay there? Ray, do you know? They don't currently pay us rent.
No.
So are we looking at, and I'm assuming that the departments that are there now have a need for greater, space.
Right.
And so to me, the ability to provide revenue is not as critical as providing service, because those are not giving us revenue now unless we're thinking of somebody outside of those departments that may be coming in from the outside, taking over the building and paying us rent. So I just want to make that point that I don't think that that's necessarily should be rated that high.
That's right.
Well, I guess,
Go ahead, Supervisor
just
Munzer.
a comment. I mean, I've heard that COG is looking for different space and they're renting, and they're paying rent now. So that's a possibility where it could be revenue generating. And just throwing it out, Health and Human Services, now I know it wouldn't be efficient, but they pay rent. So they just went into negotiation, or we approved a negotiation for them today to rent more space. Can they come in here, as an example, and pay for space from us? So if somebody can pay rent, why not?
But Health and Human Services is paying somebody other than county, right? They're paying the owner of the building.
But they're paying rent.
Right.
So if they came in, and again, I don't know, I don't think it'd be efficient for them to come into town and do it. But I'm just saying, if there is someone out there, and I can't think of all the people that pay rent now, but if there is someone that wants to use that space and are able to pay rent from some source other than general fund, is that important to us?
Got it. Thank you.
I think first is the compatibility issue in my mind. Compatibility, what kind of offices we have there now, and whether or not they have a need for expansion. Oh, Joe Paul. Were you watching this on the computer? Yeah, take a breath. Take a breath. Yes, we were just about ready to give away your space to COG. But, I think compatibility and the offices that are there now, we have to have an understanding if they are short of space. I think the elections made a pretty strong case that it's really, they need to have some different arrangement than what they have. They have a lot of volunteers up to the second floor, and it's you have a real tight shared space. It's not uncommon that they don't share space, I think. But still, that should, come into
Well,
play,
I think that's
too.
why Joe Paul ran down here so fast. He heard I was trying to rent his space out from underneath him.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
One of the items that we did discuss at our last Facilities Committee meeting was the ability to actually rent to, receiving funds for a government agency. So Joe Paul was going to do a little bit of homework on this, and he's here actually to talk a little bit about that.
You better be money, Joe.
Just when I thought I was comfortable watching the meeting from my office, I started hearing things that, uh-oh. Angela hands me my jacket, says, you better go.
That way you're sweaty?
That's part of it. Actually, the whole question of rent, when a county owns a building free and clear, the question that I posed to the state and to actually the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, who puts out the circular A87 and 133, for the cost plan, whether a county who owns a facility free and clear can charge rent to another government agency. As you know, when it comes to surplus property, we had a situation where we found out that, well, actually, our department head here, Steve Wittry, as part of the process of going through the surplus property, it gets declared surplus, and then it needs to be offered, if it's real property, to another government, free of charge. So that kind of planted the seed of doubt in me to actually look further into this idea of can we actually charge rent from other government agencies on county-owned property, and I have not received that information yet. I'm hoping to get a response here within the next month. As you know, the state and the federal government are very quick to want their money, but are very slow to provide information when it's requested upon them.
Mr. Chair, Joe, can we create some type of business relationship just like the finance corporation and let them be in charge of it and rent it out?
Well,
what's going on right now?
I think counties have done that in the past. They've used a nonprofit to act as its agent, as a government agent, to be able to acquire properties that are used for a quasi-government purpose. So that might end up being one of the solutions to how we deal with not only this question, but other questions that I think the committee has talked about.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Any questions, comments from Steve Wittry?
Yeah, one thing, and I just thought of this as Joe Paul was talking right now. I haven't had a chance to talk with him or county council about this at all, but one of the things that comes to mind is as we talk about financial ability to pay for space or things like that, because as Joe Paul mentioned, this is something that just came new as we're thinking about waiting for the answer. One of the things to keep in mind also is that there's going to be cost to move anybody into that building. There's going to be tenant improvement costs to reorganize walls, HVAC systems, and so forth. So whether we actually own the building free and clear, that's a question that I would raise as well, because those tenant improvements are going to have some cost, and perhaps that rent can offset the actual cost of those improvements to pay down those improvements, so to speak. So perhaps there's a way around that, short of creating another business council idea. But that's something to consider as well. Where do we have money to make the required tenant improvements, to do improvements, to house anybody in that building? Because as you all know, we went through a budget process and our capital reserves are dwindling. So that's something to consider as well when we talk about paying rent. Who has funding perhaps to help do those tenant improvements as we go forward with the process? And then just wanted to echo one more thing is the handout that was given, the much more detailed handout, was what was given to all the departments, and then from that, primarily Adam condensed those into 4 or 5 different categories on the shorter sheet, because if we tried to use that more detailed sheet to rate all the groups, it'd be very complicated, very problematic to do that. We wanted to try to keep it in more of a simple format. So that was the intent of handing out that second sheet, the packet, was to identify where this one-page score sheet came from. So
I'd just like to also add that Trindle notified us that on the 29th and 30th, they're going to be here for a 2-day review of the building, so it'll be at the end of the month.
Does it make sense? I know we were supposed to have a facilities meeting. I don't know if it dealt on this topic at all, but at some point we will, and have this information and the committee. Maybe what we should consider developing 2 or 3 options for the board and why, compiling, and then bring it back and reviewing through those options, and the board selecting at that time. But maybe the committee could do some heavier lifting and the rationale for each of the options, 2 or 3, and that's it. And hopefully the board could make a decision, and then we go to the next process as far as going forward.
Yeah, Why not?
Yep.
Okay? All right. Okay, that's what we'll do.
But one other thing, as far as storage, I know that that's critical for a lot of the things that, when I spoke about this last time, that we have records that are old and they need to be preserved. Is that when I look at the third efficiency to be gained by additional square footage and it says office storage space, does that mean that addresses that
I would
as
categorize
well?
that under item 2, which talks about risk factors to records or risk factors to personnel.
Oh, so that can be included in there
Yeah,
as well?
that kind of falls into the risk factors of losing important documents or risk to public or employees' safety. So it would kind of fall more into that category than into the third category.
You think? Because I don't see that in
Or we
the...
can talk about that at the facilities meeting too.
Okay, and then we can make it a little more specific, because I think that's important.
I'll open it up for a public comment. Anyone from the public want to comment on the future space in the courthouse? Okay, I'll close public comment, and
They're here for the other stuff, Anthony.
any other comments from the staff or board?
I just want to get clarification, so then we will, as the Facilities Committee, look at the applications that were made, and we're not going to rate them then, or we rate them?
We will rate them, and then what we'll do is provide 2 or 3 options and or mixes and rationalize it and present that to a full board.
The pros and cons on why we're giving those options?
Right.
Okay, I get it.
When you say options, do you mean actually deciding what departments?
Yes.
Yeah.
A mix of, okay.
Yeah, so,
Talk to Joe for the next month or so.
you know, I've seen Pat Lowe, we could make it a homeless shelter, 9,000 feet. So if you guys don't get going with the labor camp agreement, so.
I'm looking at Jerry. Hey, Jerry.
All right, County Council want to report for our closed session?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Board of Supervisors will now adjourn into closed session to discuss agenda items number 38, 39, and 40. Agenda item number 38 is to confer with its labor negotiators.
man, it's hot in here. They keep messing with that air
It's
conditioner.
93 degrees out there right now. No, well, cell phone says 93. Yeah, you're probably right. Look
But
at
it
the
may, you may be okay.
You're right. It's about 75. It's supposed to be hot today. Today, yeah. I went home. Hey.
County Council, would you like to report out from closed session?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Board of Supervisors met in closed session to discuss agenda items number 38, 39, and 40 on today's agenda. Agenda item number 38, the board met and conferred with its labor negotiators under California Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated negotiators were Georgia Cochran, Interim Director of HR, and Jackie Credico, Management Analyst. The employee organization involved was the Institutions Association. At this time, the board took no reportable action. In regards to agenda item number 39, the board met and conferred with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation and the initiation of litigation pursuant to subdivision C of Government Code Section 549569 in one case. At this time, the board took no reportable action. And finally, agenda item number 40, the board met to consider the appointment of a county employee. In this case, it was the Assistant County Administrator. The authority for this closed session is found in California Government Code 54957. The board took no reportable action.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to adjourn to July 23rd?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.